Okay, if you go to the YouTube channel, it all should be there now.
Okay.
Oilers Live Podcast. Oilers Live Podcast. Oilers Live Podcast. Oilers Live Podcast.
Now, get ready to talk hockey. Streaming from the Oilers Live Studio. Subscribe or follow today.
Hey, Dash here for another edition of Tuesday Oilers Live. Michael is missing. We kind of know where he is, but we don't really know where he is. And I am very proud to be hosting the episode tonight with a friend of the network, Sean Patrick Ryan. Welcome to the show tonight, bud.
Thanks, Dash. Great to be here.
Yeah, great to have you. It'd be exciting. Happy to be able to chat some hockey with you and jumping in to be able to be in the guest chair, the chair that I normally sit in. But we'll do it the other way around tonight. The last week in the NHL saw some interesting happenings, I guess we'll call it. Not only do we have the NHL entry draft tomorrow and all of the opening of free agency and qualifying offers to follow that. We're still waiting for some Oilers to be signed. We have a clue of some Oilers that may be signed, some Oilers that may be let go, and some Oilers that may be let go and then come back. We'll see. Second time in franchise history that the Oilers are without their first round pick starting in tomorrow's draft, and they're left with 3 picks in the second, 5th, and 6th. Is that what it is? Or 6th and 7th?
Yeah.
Connor McDavid wins 4 trophies. Skinner gets second. Connor McDavid not quite the consensus pick. Anything jump out at you in the last? Oh, Taylor Hall traded. Jeepers. Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
So anything jump out at you?
We got a lot to talk about.
That's what that tells me.
Yeah.
Jumping into it, we can maybe start off, given that tomorrow's the draft. There's obviously a lot that goes into a day at the draft, and I'm not sure that everybody fully understands that. I've got a good friend that's an NHL scout, and he has told me a lot about the procedures and how it goes and everything that goes into it. And every game he's got to attend, and every game his bird dogs have to attend, and all the consolidation of reports and sitting around a boardroom table and arguing for your guy and so on and so forth. For those of you that don't know out there, Sean is a scout for the Oshawa Generals, and that's obviously a different level of scouting. It's not an NHL scout, but you are a very important part of the process. What do you see in the day, in the week, in the month, in the life of a scout? How does that look for you?
It's grueling. It takes up a lot of time and a lot of effort. I'm not going to lie. It took more time than I thought initially, but I mean, I absolutely love it. And it's a process, right? Like even though it's not the NHL, at the OHL, you're kind of starting fresh every year, kids that you don't really know too much about. And you just kind of go in there really with no preconceived notions at all. You're seeing a lot of players for the first time. And yeah, you hit the road, and I'm fortunate being in London. I'm close to so many different teams, so many different towns. Pretty much in a 2-hour radius, I can hit, Toronto, Oshawa, Windsor, Sarnia, that whole southwestern Ontario kind of thing, right? So, it's a fun process. for me, I really enjoy just discovering talent for the first time, seeing a kid's 15 years old and just being blown away by their skill, their size, and all that. And yeah, throughout the year, it's you just got to be patient, and you definitely have to have good teamwork and collaboration. We're always having meetings, and like you said, once you get to the end, you kind of just really kind of have to step up and stand up for your guys, and hope that everybody's on the same page. I know for us personally, without getting into too much details, we all tend to be on the same page. We have great team efforts or teamwork, and we're all kind of on the same page there, so that works out. But yeah, it's exciting for the kids, and it's really exciting for the scouts. I get a lot more nervous than I thought I would the first time around. So overall, though, I mean, it's fantastic.
How long have you been scouting for Oshawa?
So this was the first full year.
First full year in
yeah.
London previously, if I'm not mistaken.
So I did independent scouting, had my own Oil Night Prospect Network. We did that for about 5 years. One of my buddies, Yannick St. Pierre, got hired by the Montreal Canadiens. Tyler Campbell also did some scouting for us as well out west there. And yeah, we just kind of did that on our own dollar. And we just scouted for the NHL. So we scouted the OHL for the NHL. Mainly, we're the entire CHL, actually. I focus on the OHL. Didn't get paid a dime for it, but we absolutely loved it. And Oshawa kind of took notice and gave me an opportunity. And I'm so grateful. And hopefully I plan on working for this team for a long time. I love the OHL. That's my baby. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with that.
So do you feel like that investment in the Oil Night helped you get that job in Oshawa and being an official paid scout?
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, 100%. As a scout, you really have to be strong in your beliefs, stand up for yourself kind of thing, and, have strong opinions. Right. And that's kind of how I operated previously. I wasn't really influenced by other people's ratings or rankings. I trusted my eyes, my gut sort of thing, and kind of stuck with that. And that's one of the things that they really liked about that. So, yeah.
Well, congrats, man. That's not an easy job to get into. And like I said, I've got a friend in the job, and he was passed down through 3 generations. His grandfather and father were also scouts and coaches and players in the NHL. So his last name certainly helped him get there. And it still takes hard work. A lot of travel, a lot of miles, a lot of nights, watching hockey in small towns and nice arenas or not nice arenas. And every year can kind of dictate the road you travel based on who it's important that you see and who you want to see and who your team wants to see. And I found it interesting when he discussed that ultimately your job is still selling. You understand hockey and you look at hockey, but if you ever want anybody that you're really emphatic or passionate about to be drafted, or looked at seriously by the team you're employed by, that you really got to try and sell that player. He gave me a perfect example of Gruby coming, from the Rangers, and how a player like that in almost any other organization would have been looked at completely differently. His opinion was that Gruby is a hell of a player, and that the Oilers made a really nice transaction there, and that if that wasn't a Western leaguer that went back home west every summer, and he was a kid from Boston College, he'd still be there.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the way that Rangers franchise operates, right? It's a little bit of a Boston Mafia there. Giving Laviolette a second run is your perfect proof in that. But
yeah.
So, we see guys like Gruby coming over, and I guess my point in all of that is not only that it's interesting that he felt that way, but also just how fickle it can be, right? One little opportunity here, or, he mentioned that you can be 5 pounds overweight in one camp, and then that just sticks with you for some reason. Or, he goes home every summer. He's not committed. And it's just like they get certain things in their head, and that opportunity is that razor thin.
Mm-hmm. For sure. And even with like when we do the scouting, it's really the video's not good at all at this level. Like watching U15 games and the GTHL, the Greater Toronto Hockey League, everything's behind a paywall and that. So it can be difficult. So when you go watch tournaments and things like that, I mean, we may only see some guys 3, 4, 5 times. And if a guy's having an off day, one of those days, that does kind of stick with you for quite some time, right? So, we have a lot of different scouts and we catch them at different times, and you hope that you can kind of catch them on a good time. So we have that debate. But with so many guys in all of Ontario, it's possible that, some kind of their draft stock takes a hit a little bit just because of circumstance, right? So
how do you, what's your opinion on how, that's a pretty, I don't know what the right word is, but it's a steep process. It's a fickle process. It's a, to be recognized at U16, to be recognized at U18, to be recognized at U20, to go in the NHL entry draft. You got to be a hell of a player along the way, right? Or see or have opportunity early. And there's only so many guys like Sidney Crosby and Connor McDavid that are almost born to be hockey robots. So what are your thoughts on the importance of that process through those stages and making sure that we've got quality NHL players by the time they get there?
Well, it is quite the process, and there's so many kids that just don't really get that opportunity too, especially like in the Toronto area, which is another completely separate issue, right? But I find for me, like I think the trickiest part at this level is really identify. Like there's lots of kids that have talent, but when they're 15 years old, I mean, there are so many kids, Dash, that are 5'8", 140 pounds.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So like, how do you distinguish?
Like
Because
I
obviously
was.
we're looking for skill, right? Like in the NHL with the draft coming up here, all these kids are 17, 18, and they're still going to, get a little bit stronger, a little bit bigger sort of thing. Right. But if a guy's 6'3", 190, you kind of know, okay, he's going to be 6'4", 205 or whatever. Right. But when they're 15, they're tiny. Right. And I was just we were doing this right before our draft. We were kind of talking about that, and we were looking back at some of the players. And Jack Quinn, for example, played up in Ottawa area, and when he got drafted in the OHL, he went in the second round. I think he was 5'8", 5'8.5", and 150 pounds or something, soaking wet. Right, wasn't much to him, but he was a big time scorer. Well, He ended up being a second round pick in the OHL. He ended up the 8th overall pick in the NHL by Buffalo, and he's 6'1", 195 now. So one of the things we have to kind of factor in is the parents. Like, are the parents big? If the kid's 5'8" and 140, are the parents big? Do you think they're going to kind of be like the dad sort of thing, or like the mom? Different variables there. And a lot of kids, that's where it ends for them, right? They don't get drafted. I know there's lots of talented kids in this draft that we had that they had talent, but they were just too small, right? And you can't take all the small skilled guys, because it is in the NHL, you have to be bigger and stronger and be able to compete. And it's the same thing in the OHL, right? So it is quite the process. It's fascinating. I mean, I could talk about it forever, but
that's why we're here.
Well, yeah, right. But I mean, what I do want to say though, I truly believe and I've always said this, NHL teams in any league you are in, you have to trust your scouts. Your scouts are the ones that do all the legwork. They've seen the flaws. They've seen the good things, the bad things. At the end of the day, you got to trust your scouts, right? So, I guess we'll get into Edmonton and their draft history in a bit, but that's kind of the gist of it.
Well, I mean, we can segue with that, really, if you'd like. I think ultimately the Oilers are the perfect example of why it is important to draft and develop. Ultimately, there's a bit of a, situation, I would say, where the middle class is disappearing in the NHL, and that leaves us with the superstars getting the biggest salaries and everybody else left to fight for the small ones. And given we've got ELC contracts out there, that makes finding that ELC player that can contribute at an NHL level almost crucial. So, you talked about the differences a little bit in drafting between U16 and U18, but it doesn't for all the Griffin Reinhardts, there's an Alex DeBrincat, right? For all the doubters, there's guys that break the mold and there's guys that don't. What are those, like that make or break type of situations that are the difference in those guys becoming quality NHL players right away? And what are your comments on the importance of drafting and developing and how that relates to the Oilers?
Okay. Yeah. Good questions. I just see Kirk asked before. I don't want to miss it. How many scouts per OHL team on average? I think we have 8 or 9, I think, on ours, and they're all kind of regional spread out. I think that's pretty, I think you're looking at somewhere between 7 to 10 per team, I think, ultimately. Yeah, I mean, obviously having guys on ELCs is huge, right? For a cap strap team, it's really, really important not only to hit, anybody can hit on their first round pick, right? Or second round pick, hopefully. Right. But finding those guys in the 4th, 5th, 6th round in the NHL draft, let's say, those are huge, but it doesn't stop there. You still have to draft and develop, right? So good examples are Ty Tullio and Carter Savoy. Those 2 guys are in the AHL currently, or were in the AHL currently. So those are fantastic draft picks, but you still got to give them the ice time, and you still have to you got to make sure they develop properly. If not, it's a complete waste of time, right? And the teams like Tampa and that are successful, they hit on these guys in the middle, late rounds because they developed them properly, right? They had fantastic farm teams, and now you can see it carrying over to the NHL team. So that's a huge thing. I mean, and again, just, talking about, and I guess this will segue moving forward. That includes Europeans as well, right? I've always kind of been a firm believer and a little bit of a critic. Edmonton, they do a great job of giving the McLeods and, the first and second round picks a lot of ice time, but I think it's just as important. You got to give those other guys, those Maximovs who I used to love. You got to give guys like that and Tullio, Savoy. You got to really try and develop those, because that's found money, right? If a 5th round pick ends up playing on your team, like a Brendan Gallagher, who was a 5th round pick of Montreal, look how amazing that guy's been, right? Yeah. That could do wonders for your franchise. You get a top 6 player at that cheap. So yeah, the development's huge. And really that's kind of what makes or breaks a lot of these organizations.
Totally agree. Well said. Talking about the Oilers, I guess, in particular then, I'd like to say Renegade Man 83's comment that we've highlighted here. Oilers should concentrate on getting more veterans, especially on D. Oilers can't win the cup with young players. That's interesting. I'd argue that you can win the cup with young players. It's rare to find impact players under the age of 21, 22, 23 that are still on ELCs that can compete in the playoffs and be players that can make a difference. But I would argue that there's still Stanley Cup winning teams and playoff teams that have them. That said, I can't argue with the fact that I do think we probably need more veterans on D. Going in with DeHarnay and Broberg is a little bit scary there. And like I said earlier, the Oilers are the perfect example of the upper class and the lower class with very little room for a middle class anymore, with our better players eating up the majority of our salary. Really, the rest of our team has to be filled out with people either making $1 million or willing to make $1 million. Can we find veteran D out there that are willing to make $1 million that can make a difference? Or is that why it's so important to have your youth develop so that guys like Broberg and, I know it's not a D, but Holloway, etc., can step up in these situations?
I mean, everybody's got a different philosophy. I still believe in draft and develop. You want to have a strong defense. You just keep drafting big guys that can move the puck and got skill, and nobody's going to trade you a top pair defenseman. It's very rare, right? And if they do, it costs a lot. So you're still sacrificing what you've already had. I understand what Renegade Man 83 is saying, the young players. I would argue you just have to have the right players, right? Like Yamamoto obviously hasn't really worked out in Edmonton. He's been there a long time. 6 or 7 years, right? And he's still not really a surefire top 6 reliable player. But a guy like Robert Thomas was taken 2 or 3 picks ahead of him, and he was a key part of St. Louis winning the Stanley Cup on the third line there. He had at age 20 or 21 or whatever, he had a real nice role there. You could certainly make it happen, but I think Edmonton in this case, they had Puljujarvi and Yamamoto have been there for so many years, and it just wasn't quite working. That in this case, yeah, maybe switching to a couple of veterans might work out.
Anybody out there you see that fits that bill?
To be honest, I haven't really looked at the who's available kind of thing. I mean, for Edmonton, I still believe that they talked about, I still believe defense is the key. So we talk about draft and development. There are guys like Desharnais and Broberg. Are they ready to really step in and make a difference for a team that's ready to win the cup now? I mean, that's obviously the debate. Do you move one of those guys and, well, obviously you get more for Broberg than you would Desharnais. But do you make that move now and try and strengthen your team? I mean, it's tough to say. Again, it depends on who's available. But, I mean, Erik Karlsson obviously would look great in an Oilers uniform. I don't know how much it would cost. I don't know if he would want to come there, can make that happen or not. But they need somebody else on defense in that top 4. Like, they don't have a draft pick this year, first round, because they gave up Ekholm, who was phenomenal pickup. But like Nurse and Ceci, your top pair, I mean, I worry about that. I worry about the defensive structure in general. They got to do something. I don't know if trading Broberg's the right answer. If you do trade Broberg, I would definitely want another defenseman back. I wouldn't worry too much about the forwards. I still think you can kind of fill in some role players up there, but that defense, man, they still needs help. A lot of help.
So it's you brought it up. It's out there that Broberg is potentially available. I'm not totally against Broberg being packaged in with something to be able to get us, exactly what you and Renegade Man and I all agree is that we need, someone better or someone more veteran or someone more polished in that top 4. Ultimately, I think with, there's obviously some, it's just going to be interesting to see how it all falls together here in the next few days as well, especially with the draft coming. And can they move pieces? Will they move draft picks now? Will they move draft picks for draft picks and try to get more trade equity for down the road? But ultimately, to finish the thought I was saying earlier, is that I'm not sure that trading Broberg is the best strategy overall. But where the Oilers are and win now, I get it. Mm-hmm. I can't fault a decision like that, even though, right, a player that you just said, draft and develop, get big guys, get big guys that can skate. Right now, Broberg is probably our best puck transporter, and it might not even be close. I mean, carrying the puck, not passing the puck. Right. But as far as zone exits go on your skates, he might be the best we have, so there was flashes, whether he's there at 21, they say there's 200 NHL games before you really figure it out. Bouchard doing it at 23. Will Broberg do it at 23? I don't know, but is it worth trying to figure that out? If we can, I made a suggestion on last week's show. What if you could trade Broberg and Yamamoto to Florida for Montour, or something like that. The money works and they get a, defenseman that fits into that smaller price range, and we get a top 4 guy. Now, I don't think Montour gets 73 points with the Oilers because he's not going to be quarterbacking the power play, but he's a certified top 4 defenseman. There's the Susie talk. There's the different names out there. I'm just not sure we can get it done. Thoughts on the way the Oilers go into tomorrow? What do you think they'll do with their picks and or trades?
I think they need to get creative, somehow free up some money, because I know that's obviously an issue, and they don't have, like you said, they don't have a first round pick. So whether trading down, I mean, again, this is just my own personal philosophy. Even though I'm a big draft guy, big draft and develop guy, it's just currency, right? Like, draft picks are currency. if you can move picks for veterans, if that's what you need to do to make it happen, then make it happen, right? The Oilers are in such a win now mode with Draisaitl and McDavid, their contracts, and just how the whole team is structured financially. They are in win now mode. So, of course, you don't want to give up a guy like Philip Broberg because he is a big guy. He can skate, the athleticism. Other teams are, I'm sure there's teams that are just drooling over him. First round pick, top 10 pick. But again, like, what do you do, right? If you could get another, let's just say, for example, if you could get another Matthias Ekholm type player for Philip Broberg right now, whoever that person is, would you trade Philip Broberg right now for another Matthias Ekholm? I mean, if you want to win right now in the next couple of years, you'd almost be crazy not to, right? Like, I don't think they can really afford to be patient because there's not enough depth there. Even if Broberg plays, he's probably playing on the third pair, right? So, yeah, I hope they get a little creative. I know they're typically conservative for the most part, but trade down and acquire somebody, somehow move. Like you said, Yamamoto, I know Fogel, I think his name is out there too, potentially moving him, although I thought he had a pretty good season for the most part. He's kind of a good role player, but yeah.
Just expensive third liner, that's all.
Yeah, I think Yamamoto's the guy that probably needs a change of scenery, and then if you want to be bold, then Broberg's probably the guy. But get creative and let's do something hopefully tomorrow instead of just playing it out. But again, it takes two to tango, right? So it's easier said.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I don't know what the definition of creative is. I know I agree with you. I just don't know what it is. Like if he comes out of this thing with a connecting or something, I don't see that as realistic. But that's creative and that's awesome. But ultimately, I do really expect, and part of me kind of hopes, Sean, that it's just real quiet. I kind of hope that he just keeps his powder dry and doesn't really do anything. Trade Yamo, absolutely. If you can get a late round pick for Yamo, great. Similarly with if you package Broberg, so be it. I hope there is a bigger name player with some term, especially if you've got to give up picks with that. All said and done, I've heard rumors they want to take a defenseman with that pick. They have their eye on somebody, and if that person's not there, that potentially they take that pick and turn it into 2 picks in later rounds. In which case, if they trade Yamo and trade that pick and then keep their other 2, all of a sudden they turn 3 picks into potentially 5 or 6. And what I'd like to see them do with that is, again, keep the powder dry, as our friend Alan Mitchell says, and get to the trade deadline and do what they did with Ekholm. You said it. If they can find somebody like that, I would honestly rather wait that they waited till the trade deadline to do that, because you can fine tune what you need. Right now, we're almost hunting defensemen with a shotgun, right? Anybody that's a top 4, let's go. Whereas he got Ekholm with a sniper rifle. He knew exactly what we needed. We don't know what injuries are coming potentially, right? Like I'm not wishing that on anybody, but what if Ekholm gets hurt? Right now we know what we need at the trade deadline. And then, then you've got more picks, as you said, draft equity, trade picks or draft equity and assets. So I'd like to see it slow, if we can. That said,
sorry, before we move on, what about
goaltending? Yeah, please. With the Oilers in particular?
Yeah, like are they going Jack Campbell? Is there any way do you want to move that contract? Are we going to go with Skinner or Campbell?
I think we see, I don't know if I'm comfortable with it, but I know that I have to try and be, because that, in my opinion, 99% is what's going to be there. With the trade movement clause on, or I just don't like where's Campbell going to go that he's happy? Do you want to go to Chicago and be the starter for 60 games, but lose 40 of them? Like, the only other opportunity is to go out there and win. The goalie carousel that's happening, I really don't think there's a lot of value even out there for Hellebuck right now, versus what the Jets want, let alone somebody like Campbell. Now, you mentioned creative. Can they get creative like LA did with Cal Peterson? Shit, that'd be awesome. I mean, that boom, drop the mic if he does. Like that's another fantastic Holland move if that works out. And I'd love to see it, but I don't know.
Well, I mean, the thing is, before the draft, there's a lot of teams that are really kind of on edge and like willing to move or make a deal, right? Like dumping Taylor Hall to Chicago, right? Philly's trying to trade everybody. They're trying to get rid of D'Angelo, and that got blocked. They got rid of Hayes already. Carter Hart, there's Carter Hart's apparently available. Travis Anheim, like there's lots of names out there, teams that are looking to make a move. And yeah, I mean, it's easy for me to say, I'm not a GM, but
the trade has to be there. And you're right. There's two ways to it. Like when, hypothetically to Chicago, say we'll take Campbell, Broberg, and next year's first. That's, there's probably no return really for that. I don't know. So
I know any trade Edmonton makes is probably going to get like the other team to take on salary, right? Like take all of Campbell's
in that instance for sure.
And we'll give you a first round pick or this year's second or something. I don't know, whatever. But yeah, I don't know. I don't like to, if I ever were a GM, I don't think I would be, I would certainly be looking to get super creative all the time if possible. And there's teams that do that. They do a great job of that. Somehow they're pushed up against the cap and they just somehow make a move, make it work. I mean, Edmonton's so close. They're right on the cusp. I would love to see something like that happen. But again, that could just be wishful thinking. It does take two to tango. So I get that.
Yeah, for sure. Transition a little bit to what we think might happen tomorrow. I've heard that they might be looking for a defenseman. We know they're drafting in the mid 50s if they stay with that pick. There's some defensemen in that range. You may be familiar with, Andonovsky from the Kitchener Rangers. And, I know there's a few guys from the Q as well, like Beaudry and Beckner in that range from the BCHL. So there's a lot of guys floating, a couple of Swedes. Let's not count Holland out and taking a guy like Asplund. Any ideas where you think they might go with that pick?
Let me close that. You can see me. I mean, I didn't do a lot of scouting of that, of course, just more U15. So I don't really have a good read on guys' individual games. But I mean, defense does make sense to me. They promoted Darnay and Broberg, right? And they lost Samorukov. They traded for Kostin. And so defensive depth, I think, is a bit of a organizational need. So if that's the route they go, that certainly would make sense to me. I mean, I would have liked to seen a goalie, Wallstat specifically, previously, but that's a different story. So, I mean, goaltending I guess second round's a little too early for a goalie unless somebody just blows your socks off, right? But
nowadays it seems that way.
I think they should draft a goalie somewhere. But yeah, defense makes sense second round for me. They got enough forwards as it is.
So part of what we've been doing lately on Oilers Live is reviewing a couple of the headlines that are out there. And maybe this is a good time to transition to an article that I know we both read that is from Al Mitchell Lowtide at The Athletic. I put the QR code up in the corner there for anybody that wants to scan it and have a read if you happen to have a subscription to The Athletic. And if you're not paying $1 a month for that, I'm not sure why. Some really good stuff. This one in particular, just to kind of give everybody that's listening and might not be able to, the lowdown is that, in the previous 11 years between Tambellini, Chiarelli, and McTavish, there was 11 Russians. No, sorry, is that what it was? 11 Russians? No, 11 years. And yeah, I think it was 11 Russians over that time. But since Holland's been drafted, there's been 5 Russians and 22 picks. So almost, 25%. It references that Holland in previous regimes in Detroit did really well in drafting Russians and flipping Russians in trades, and as well as finding Datsuk in the 6th round. It's clear he's got a similar strategy here, especially with some of the picks that he's made. They're mirroring what he did in Detroit when they're, trying to be found in later rounds, whether it's Konovalov or Berezin or Petrov or, there's the different names that have been taken. Thoughts on the article or just Holland's strategy in drafting Russians and whether that risk reward pays off?
I think the whole landscape's changed with Russians just in general. Like, it's true, Holland had a great history with Russians, obviously building championship teams, but with the KHL now just attracting so many players, it really is a gamble, right? Because any Russian player that doesn't get drafted in the first couple of rounds is more than likely going to make more money in the KHL than they are, playing it out in the AHL and then eventually making the NHL as a, fourth, fifth round pick salary, whatever that is. It's interesting, the names, looking at that article. Most of those guys are all late except Konovalov, who's, I guess he didn't really, did he finish in the AHL? Do you know that, Konovalov?
Yeah.
I know he was in the AHL. I don't know. Did he stay there? Or did he?
I believe so. No, I believe he did finish there. If not, he was healthy scratched at the least. But yeah, he was drafted 85th. Deniskin 193, Berezin 138, Petrov 180, and Yevseyev, pardon my pronunciation, at 190.
I remember staying up watching a lot of Deniskin when I was doing stuff for the Oilers there for the All Night. I remember clipping all kinds of videos, and I was a big fan of his. I don't know what his deal is now, but it's so he's drafted 5. Now the Oilers also had Samorukov, and Holland traded him away. Oh, he did. Okay.
Thanks, Kirk.
He traded him away. He let Maximov, who was one of my favorite prospects, he let him go, which still, I still kind of scratch my head about that. Obviously, there's something we're not aware of. He had a good AHL season, and he seemed like he was on the up, and then there was COVID, of course, and then he went over and he was a late ad out in the KHL, and then he came back and he got COVID, or he got hurt, and then he got COVID, and then he didn't want to go to ECHL, and they just said, see you later. I don't know, whatever. I guess that speaks more to the draft and development. But overall, in general, I think the last, 11 years they're talking about, the Oilers have really not had any success, even going back to Yakupov. No success with Russians. I don't really understand why Russians don't have success, although Kostin has worked out, but they traded for him, although
traded a Russian for him.
A Russian for a Russian, and now he might actually be out.
Yeah. Sounds like it, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know what it is with Russians in Edmonton, but I know that is a thing. And you'd have to go back and look now. I'm sure it's changed, but I remember at one point, I know for a fact that there's certain organizations that just refuse to draft Russians whatsoever. If you look at the Anaheim Ducks, I believe they didn't draft a Russian. I could be wrong on this, but I think it was like 10 to 15 years. They didn't take a single Russian, or maybe they took one really late, like something like that. Because if you end up being a good player, you can score a lot, but you're a mid-round NHL pick, you can make more money in the KHL, right? So that's really the struggle there, and that's not something really Holland had to worry about before. So much you could convince them. Everybody wanted to play in the greatest league in the world, but now the KHL, they throw so much money around that it makes more sense for guys like Slepyshev to go back over there, right?
Yeah, Slepyshev for sure. I can see that making a ton of sense. I guess just, Kostin, do you want a long-term security in the motherland? I give Hebert credit. He said it. I said that I think Kostin's crazy to leave. And why would you leave this situation where you could win a cup and play with two of the best players in the world and potentially bank those statistics and that success into, look at some of the contracts of the past, the Pisanis and Horkoffs and guys that cashed in after those runs. And he said it, money talks. So, if that's the case, and you can go back to 3 times 3 in Russia and take your 10 million American and call it a career, then so be it, I guess. Right. I do understand that. My opinion on the whole thing is, if it's kind of like a scratch ticket strategy a little bit, right? Like, you scratch it, there's a Russian name underneath, and you wait 6 months for the draw or, the hockey to roll out. And if it either pays off or it doesn't. And I think what Holland feels is maybe that those scratch tickets have a little bit more higher of a ceiling, right? If that can pay off double maybe what another one could, and look what he did with Datsuk in the 6th round. So all in all, if he can do what he did with Datsuk with Petrov and make him into that quality of a player, I think it all pays off. So to Low Tide's conclusion at that article, I guess we'll wait and see.
Yeah, for sure. And Petrov, I mean, he was kind of committed already to the CHL, so that was a good sign. So that makes sense to take a shot on someone like that, because
Right.
you already know they're coming over, right? Whereas guys,
Right.
and somebody mentioned Mitchkov, like he might not play in the NHL for a couple of years, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, Russians are proud. They're proud. They're proud people. And I mean, if you just kind of put yourself in their shoes, would you want to go play in Russia and play in the best league in Russia? Let's say the KHL is the best league. Would you want to go play in the KHL and compete for a KHL Cup if it's known as the best league in the world? Or would you want to stay in Alberta close to your home and make just as good money and be around your family and be in your country, and just you don't have to learn a different language, just different culture. I think that's what a lot of these guys kind of struggle with. They have a lot of pride and they want to be close to home, and I mean, I can't really fault them for that. If the money's there, then sure, why not, right?
Yeah, and at that kind of money in that country can, that's generations. That's Costin's grandkids will be fine.
Yeah.
So I get it. I understand the wanting to take security. We may see the same thing with Connor Brown. Right? There was a slam dunk a week ago that Connor Brown was going to be an Oiler, and now I hear on Bob Stauffer and I think it was Saravelli this morning saying that there's a very good chance that he won't be an Oiler now, that he's getting so many multi-year offers that it'd be very risky of him to take a 1-year contract with the Oilers and blow out a knee and lose a career at $1 million plus bonuses versus taking $9 to $12 million from another team. So, it's the Russian or the Canadian version of Costin, really.
I find it funny. Connor Brown's rumored to the Oilers like every year. He's a trendy guy, just like Tyson Barrie was rumored. I think Stauffer actually was hypothetically trading Tyson Barrie to the Oilers every year for like 5 years, and eventually it happened. So maybe Connor Brown, it'll happen as well. But those 1-year contracts, I definitely go for more security than that. I think he's earned it, Connor Brown, at this point in his career. I think everybody kind of knows what type of player he is. So makes sense to me if he wants a long-term deal.
Absolutely. And heavy hockey member and contributor. Tough call. Josh says with the Oilers' top guys and being in win now mode, surely that makes Edmonton a more desirable destination for some of these vets floating around looking for a shot. And I think that leads exactly into what we're saying, right? It depends who you are and what your situation is. Costin's happens to be going back home and being comfortable there. I think Connor Brown's might end up falling on the fact that he's injury prone, and being that vet looking for a shot might be much more risky than it would be for somebody like it was for Bugstad. Would you agree?
Yeah. And I'm sure, I know they're still debating whether or not to sign Costin, and maybe some of that has to do with Connor Brown, whether or not they decide they go that route or what. But I mean, I liked Costin personally. I thought he was a great locker room guy, and he kind of made everybody smile and laugh around him. And and he scored some big goals. I would consider him worth keeping now, depending, of course, what the price is. But how did you feel about him?
Oh, I mean, he won me over just by throwing knuckles and sticking up for his teammates and getting in there in scrums.
Yeah.
And that was probably already enough just to have the grit and playing the way that he was at his skill level. Then it was the fan appreciation day at Rogers Place when he refused to take a photograph with somebody that was there in a Flames jersey and gave him his Oilers jersey for the photo. Like that's that to me, that's once an Oiler, always an Oiler type of stuff, right? Like that's Ladislav Smeed type of heart. And that's what made me think that he would want to stay. And, then he goes and scores some goals towards the end of the year. Then he goes and has a pretty decent playoff. So I would absolutely love to have Clean back. I don't want to have him at 2.5 unless we can move Fogle perhaps. But if he'll take a team friendly 1.5 or 2, that's great. But I think if he goes to Arb, he's probably going to double his salary, if not more.
Yeah.
I liked that for sure. I put the next article up and the QR code's there. It's just a little one on Taylor Hall being traded. This one here is from Oilers Nation and one of their contributors, and Zach Liang. And the whole article isn't really much other than what's happened out there. And we don't need to get into the article as much as we probably just need to talk about the fact that, once beloved Oiler that went first overall was part of our hope. There's a fucking song written about the guy. and here he's been traded again.
Jeez.
For nothing again. He's the second ever first overall pick to be on 6 different teams. Can you name the other one?
First overall pick on 6 different teams.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
His initials are BB.
BB. I don't know. Who is it?
Brian Berard.
Oh, oh yeah. Brian Berard. His eye.
I read that.
Messed up his eye, yeah.
Yeah. And then got shuffled around a little bit towards the end.
Yeah.
Hell of a player. Hell of a player with one eye, for crying out loud. But I thought that was interesting. I took a screenshot of a tweet earlier today that listed all of the different players that Taylor Hall had been traded for. It was out there by Brian King. A lot of us know. Taylor Hall in his career has been traded for Adam Larson, Nick Merkley, Nathan Schnarr, Kevin Ball, Dawson Mercer, Ryder Korzak, Anders Bjork, Alexander Kishkakov, Ian Mitchell from Sherwood Park Crusaders, and Alec Regula. Big, huge list of massive names there that I could butcher.
I know a lot of those. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Interesting that a Hart Trophy winner is, never really able to pull a return, isn't it?
Yeah, it's weird. Taylor Hall he's like the highest paid babysitter in hockey. Like every time a team has a first overall pick, they trade. Taylor Hall ends up babysitting them. Like he was with Jack Hughes. He's he was with Connor McDavid, Jack Hughes, and now he's going to be with Bedard. That's it's strange. Like what has he been in the league? 13 years or 12, 13 years?
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah.
How many playoff games has he played? I don't know, 20, maybe.
Yeah, 4. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe 20.
Right, but
maybe he's got 15 playoff goals ever in his career in 13 years, and it's just like he doesn't really care. Like, I'll just go wherever. Sure, Chicago. Yeah, no, I'm not going to put them on my no trade. I'll go hang out in Chicago. They got great pizza and first overall pick. I've been there. I know how to do that. Like it's
big city, good nightlife. He can hide a little bit, maybe.
Yeah,
it's does he really want? Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting.
Well, I think that Chicago, I think that's why they're acquiring him. Like obviously it's a Boston. Obviously Boston's dumping salary, right? But when they called Chicago, I'm sure Chicago's like, well, he would be and the word is mentor. He would be a great mentor for Connor Bedard. Look what he was with Connor McDavid. He was with Jack Hughes. Like he knows that role, right? And he's still 31-ish. So he would be a good fit. And I'm sure they probably have to get to the salary cap floor too. I don't know what their salary is, right? So from Chicago's standpoint, it makes a lot of sense. I don't know the last time he updated his no trade list. Maybe it's been a while. I'm surprised Chicago wasn't on there, although they had Kane and Taves, so maybe he was okay going there 6 months ago.
Do no trade lists transfer when you get traded?
I
just thought of that.
They do. I think they do, but you get an opportunity to modify it. I believe you're allowed to. They don't rip it up once you get traded, but I think periodically you can change it. I'm sure we've had instances before where somebody had a team on a trade list and then they took it off, or vice versa. But
interesting.
James, 12 playoffs. Okay, 12 playoff games. Yeah, we were close.
Oh, there we go. Right in between the two of us, 20-5. I was just joking, but the thing I guess with Hall that's kind of fascinating is the most interesting part yet might still be to come. I get the mentoring part of it, right? You were a first overall pick yourself, then you watched Connor McDavid come into the league, then you watched Jack Hughes come into the league. This situation is the first time, however, that he's been given a first overall draft pick. Well, I guess that's not true. Connor Bedard hasn't been drafted yet, so let's hold my horses on that. But ultimately, we know he's going there, and he didn't know they were getting Hughes when he went to New Jersey. He didn't know we were getting McDavid when he was in Edmonton. That all said, do you think that there is any thought from Chicago to the fact that Taylor Hall is very clearly a lucky charm for the first overall pick? And if they bring him into the organization, they might be able to get another one next year.
Yeah. Can you imagine? Well, that's possible.
It's possible. What I also see potentially happening is the fact that they use him to get to the cap floor. They wait till this year's trade deadline, maybe retain half of his salary, give somebody a player at $3 million for the next 2 years. And I think that maybe brings in a first round pick or very close to it, to be honest. So, by giving up these two these two prospects that aren't worth a whole bunch, they could potentially flip Taylor Hall into a position where they've got a first round draft pick, which would be a pretty smart move on Chicago's part if that ends up happening.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's all short term. It solves a need. And then long term, you're looking down the road. You can also take advantage of it twice, right? So it would make perfect sense to flip them at the trade deadline to the Oilers. I'm just kidding.
All right. Well, flipping on to the next topic, and then the last article we're going to talk about. And really, I just chose this one because it talks about both the Flames and the Jets. The QR code is up there because I did want to talk about both of them, but I just wanted to find something that was in the same article. So this one's on fansided.com. I probably could have found a lot of more local articles that actually talked about the Flames in general. But this particular article is kind of just, why Canadians can't have nice things, and, how there hasn't been a Stanley Cup in Canada for 30 years. And, is it market size? Is it the fact that Americans and some Europeans don't want to live in Canada? Is it the taxes? Is it, that Gary Bettman keeps stacking the cards against Canadian teams, which there's a lot of conspiracies out there. I think you had a chance to see the article. I don't know if there's any thoughts on that in general, but what I'd like to talk about is why people are leaving the Flames. If you find that entertaining as I do, and then we can move on to the Jets after that.
Do the Flames still have a team?
Red Deer, maybe, or is it Atlanta?
I thought they were moving to Red Deer, maybe. Yeah,
well, I heard they wouldn't. I heard they wouldn't give Red Deer a franchise because Calgary didn't have one either.
Oh, yeah, maybe that's what it is. Yeah, I don't know what's going on in Calgary. They seem like they had a good thing going a few years ago, and then they couldn't get over the hump in the playoffs, and they just kind of retooled, we'll say, and that just did not work out as well. I'm sure Living's now in Toronto. I think not that I've spoken to a lot of people on this, but I really think it is a combination of the weather, the poor weather, the media, because the media is just crazy in Canada. They're all over them. Whereas if you're playing in Florida, nobody knows. And 100% is taxes for sure. So taxes, media, and weather. I think if you just kind of weigh all that in, it's like, do I really want to go play for a Canadian team? Even if you're a Canadian kid, it's like, man, if I struggle, I'm going to get torched on social media, and it's, I worry about my mental health. Your
family. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. People's houses getting egged and whatever. So, I understand, especially if you're not Canadian, any non-Canadian player, why would they want to come to such a crazy market? I understand for sure. You can make a lot more money in the U.S. It's better weather, playing in Arizona or Florida or whatever, right? The competitive juice, you want to be part of something great, bringing a cup back to Canada. Like you said, it's been 30 years, but I think all Canadian teams suffer from that. The same thing, the weather and the taxes and all that. So that's why it's important if you can find guys that, like Zach Hyman. You find a guy like Zach Hyman who wanted to come play in Edmonton. right? He wanted to be a part of that. You really have to kind of make it work. And I mean, Klim Kostin, like, he fits in great if he wants to play there. I've always been of the mind, I mean, get good players, keep good players, right? I'm okay with spending a little bit extra to keep a guy that you know is a great fit and is going to be part of your core, as opposed to overpaying because you didn't have any other options, sort of thing, like in free agency, for example, right? Paying a little bit extra for Klim Kostin to keep him, and then instead of throwing a bunch of money at Connor Brown, for example, like, which one do you weigh, right? But yeah, I mean, that's never going to change. Canadian teams are always going to struggle with that, right? And it just is what it is. You have to deal with the hand you're dealt, right?
So with the Flames in particular, if Sutter was still in the coach's seat, all we would have heard about today was, oh, everybody's leaving because of Sutter.
Yeah.
Well, Sutter's not there. And they've got a player-friendly coach and a GM that's brand new that I heard compared to being called the Ted Lasso of hockey GMs, which made me giggle.
Yeah.
Conroy. Yet there's still 4 or 5 of their best players potentially looking to walk. What is it with Calgary in particular that you think that this is happening there?
Well, I'm not one to speak to that because I'm not in Alberta. I don't know what's going on there. I got to laugh that someone that says, some stranger, I'm from Edmonton, I'm not even sure I'd play in Winnipeg. Winnipeg's pretty damn cold. And there's not a lot to do in Winnipeg, right? They don't even have an airport. I'm just kidding.
Facts.
So again, I get it. I get why, pros don't want to play there. But Calgary in particular, I can't speak to it. I really don't. I don't know if it's the media. I don't know what it is. You probably have a better idea than I do what's going on there.
Well, I mean, when your rink is potentially not even as nice as, the Coyotes practice rink, that says something, I'm sure. I don't think they love playing in that building. I think that, and then that's probably the highest Calgarian part of this that's relative to just that franchise. And I think they struggle from all of the other things that we've already mentioned. The fact that they had 2 of their best players of their franchise be Americans that fled back to America, probably didn't leave them with the greatest reputation, whether it was the Flames' fault or not. I just, like we talked about drafting kids earlier. Once you got a little bit of a stigma, you've got a stigma. And I just think the Flames have that stigma. Whereas with the Jets, I think it's different there. I think it actually wasn't, the fans are great. The shovel day off seems fine. I think with Paul Maurice, they had the best coach in the NHL, one of the best goaltenders in the NHL, solid D, solid players, great top 6, yet everybody wants out. I'd say that's, based on the rumors. I'm not in that room, and I know you aren't either, but potentially it's a culture problem, and whether it's Scheifele or Wheeler, or it's causing a divide in the room. I don't know, but going all the way back to Bufflin throwing Kane's stuff in the shower, that place has always kind of had its power struggle.
Yeah, well, and they stripped Wheeler a couple of years ago, didn't they? Have the cap, and then there's all kinds of issues with Scheifele. I think that's probably what it is. You're talking about the stigma. It's a small NHL brethren, right? And a lot of these guys share agents. And once word gets around that it's a toxic culture and environment, then other guys don't want to go there. And a lot of times we forget that, right? Same agencies, all these guys talk. They know what's going on, or they played together or whatever. And then, the family side of it too. Like, I've never been to Winnipeg. I'm sure it's a beautiful city. But as somebody mentioned, they're not even sure they want to play in Winnipeg. I'm sure there's some people that say they don't want to raise a family in Winnipeg. It's just too damn cold and do whatever, right? So, we get so focused in on just like the hockey transactions, the hockey player. A lot of times we forget about the families and everything else, right? And I think, again, that has something to do with it. And then the finances, of course, the taxes and the weather. I still think it's a combination of all that. But if people are willing to overlook that, if you're close to a cup, for example, if you're a contending team, then there'll still be guys that'll be like, you know what, I understand all of that, but it's still going to be worth it. I could be holding the Stanley Cup. That's my dream in a couple of years. But for Calgary and Winnipeg, it kind of seems like they're going backwards, and nobody wants to jump on the ship when it's going down, right? It's going backwards. And I think that's kind of where they're at right now. That's just the general perception. So I'm not really upset about it, as rooting for the Oilers, but I understand that.
Totally agree. I'm going to use that as a bit of a segue. We hit the hour mark. We should probably start wrapping things up. I really appreciate your time. I really appreciate you jumping on, your expertise on the topic and where we are in our off season. So thanks very, very much once again.
Thanks for having me.
Always. Ultimately, I think where this has left the Oilers, the situation you speak of is kind of alluding back to what I talked to earlier, where NHL is beginning and continuing to mirror our society, where the middle class is kind of being, eliminated, and there's lower class and there's upper class. And the way that this is particularly affecting the Oilers versus the other Canadian teams we just spoke of is pretty different. There's conversely, when you're considered one of the top 4 to 5 teams that might win a Stanley Cup, as well as you have Connor McDavid, as well as you have Leon Draisaitl, as well as you have Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, right? Like the ability to, right, as I think it was some stranger said earlier, have somebody take that shot. Yeah, you're willing to take that shot in Edmonton because they have that chance and they have those players. So I believe what's hurting the other Canadian franchises in Calgary and Winnipeg is working the opposite way in Edmonton, because we're in a bit of an advantageous situation, as we've seen with Hyman and as we've seen with Derek Ryan taking a bit of a hometown discount. And, we'll see. Maybe Bugstad goes out and finds out he can't make $3 million and decides that if he's only going to make 2 somewhere, he might as well make 1.5 in Edmonton, right? So Holland's done that before, let guys go explore and then take them back. So I think it's really helped the Edmonton Oilers, conversely, just based on the situation we're in. Any thoughts on that? And then I'll give you your last words to finish off. And I know you're a veteran guest here, so you know how that works, but just first things first, thoughts on that in particular?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head there pretty good. Like you said, Edmonton is close, right? You take a shot, and for me personally, just to kind of, Holland's hands are tied, and you get paid $5 million a year. There's other GMs that can make moves, right?
Figure out a way to get out of your handcuffs when you make that much money.
Get creative, and maybe that's kind of will be my final thought going into this. I'd like to see, and again, I don't have any skin in the game, but I'd like to see the Oilers get a little creative. They are on the cusp. They are a team that's a contender, quite frankly, but they still have issues. They still have holes. Now's the time to get creative before the draft. This is where a lot of deals happen. I mean, Holland traded Datsuk's $10 million contract once to Arizona. He dumped that entire thing, right? He's done it before. He said nothing's impossible. We've seen there's too many examples now of GMs that are getting creative. We just saw it in Cal Peterson as well. I'd like to see the Oilers get creative. I'd like to see them not sit on their hands. Now, make a bold move, but don't go crazy with it. But I'd really like to see them just kind of tighten it up a little bit, get creative, free up some money, and just have a good draft. I mean, the draft is such a great time of year. Everybody gets so excited. I know we're missing a first-round pick. I say we, old habits, but I know Edmonton's missing a first-round pick, but Ekholm was totally worth it. Just have fun with the draft. Do what you can. Move up and down if you have to. Get the right guys. And ultimately, I just want to say thanks for having me on here, Dash. I appreciate it. Thanks for all the fans that are sending us texts and following along, and it's been a pleasure. And just enjoy the draft this week, guys, and have a great day.
Oilers Live.